Wyoming remains the only state in the United States where a citizen can sue the police. This is Christina Williams with Just Criminal Law.
And David Mann, legal storytelling specialist. Okay, so citizens suing the police, I'm sure there's good reason to do that. So do you have an example maybe of why that might come up?
Sure, there are times when law enforcement will do an investigation. And, it's eternally frustrating to myself and my team when the investigation is not done to the full extent that it could have been. In fact, it's done negligently. And in those cases where the officer didn't perform his duties as he should or as a reasonable officer would do, then the person who is ultimately arrested and charged can sue that officer for a negligent investigation.
Okay, so by negligence, I would assume you mean they were negligent. They did not do the job thoroughly. They may have missed key pieces of evidence or something like that?
Well, they did it below the standard. Whatever the standard should have been in this particular case, they were below that. And again, this is a mechanism for a defendant to sue the police. It doesn't mean that the defendant will win, but he must prove that that officer performed below the standard.
Okay, so what's a story maybe of that happening to someone?
Well, there's just a simple example where in Cheyenne, there was a lady who lost her driver's license, and a criminal found it. And the criminal ended up renting a U-Haul in her name and then stealing it. Well, lo and behold, the officers show up at her house with a search warrant and arrest her. And they did that really prior to conducting a reasonable investigation. So she was wrongly arrested and, had to spend time in jail because they got the wrong person.
Wow. Okay, so she's put through this sort of traumatic series of events. And I assume that she was not found guilty of that?
Correct. I mean, the charges didn't go very far. They were ultimately dismissed. But, she had to go through the experience of, number one, being arrested, number two, spending time in jail, and then number three, her name being published in the local papers. And so her reputation really was damaged.
Yeah, I mean, especially these days, so many things comes down to how it is portrayed in the press and other places. So at that point, I think you said at the beginning of this conversation we're having here that Wyoming's the only state where someone in her position could actually now sue the police for negligence, right?
That's correct. Our Supreme Court allows for a defendant who was put through the criminal justice system with a negligent investigation to ultimately sue the police officer who conducted that investigation.
That's great. So this sounds like this is, I would imagine that your opinion of this is a good thing for defendants.
It is an excellent thing for defendants. I can't tell you throughout the course of my career how many times I've really come across these investigations that, in my opinion, are negligent. And, we get firsthand experience of what that really means to our clients. Their life will never be the same. Its course has forever been altered. They've now, had to go through the whole experience of being arrested, being charged, and, a lot of times we end up going to trial. And so it's really a lot of emotional distress. It's a financial burden, and it just distracts from what they've got going on otherwise in their life. And a lot of times it's very, very damaging to their reputation. And even though the officer ultimately made the decision to investigate the person and then go to the prosecutor and say, I think we should charge this person, that officer sometimes, just doesn't really know the right answer, doesn't really know if our client did it or not. And I can't tell you how many times I've heard officers say, well, we just made the arrest and we'll let the attorneys figure it out. That is not the way it's supposed to work. That's not how the system is set up. And, instead of doing a thorough investigation, looking at the quality of evidence and the quantity of evidence, a lot of times they just, pull the trigger and make the arrest and then let the pieces fall where they may. And that's really not fair, and it's really damaging to our clients.
Yes, this sounds like it's much better than not having that recourse for defendants. So it all depends, of course, on having an attorney that is able to find these areas where the investigation was negligent. So if someone finds that they need a lawyer to do that for them, how can they get in touch with you?
Sure. What we will definitely do is when we come across a case that, a negligent investigation was done, we'll definitely point that out to our clients. And although we don't practice civil law, we'll get them in touch with somebody who can help them. And, people can find us, as always, by clicking the link in the description, and they can call, text, or chat with a member of my team anytime, day or night. Here at Just Criminal Law, we know you only get one shot at justice, so make yours count.